Good evening and welcome to Newsnight Scotland's by-election hustings special. On Thursday, the voters of Dunfermline will pick a new MSP. Tonight, the candidates from all the parties have come here to convince the voters of their individual merits and, with a bit of luck, to provide a debate which will entertain and inform the rest of us. Full-scale parliamentary by-elections for Holyrood are quite scarce, partly because members who depart from seats on the regional list system are replaced directly without an election. This is only the 8th by-election in the 14-year life of the Scottish Parliament, and 2 of them were held on the same day as UK general elections. And this is only the 2nd election to replace a member who's gone from Parliament to prison. We have the candidates from 6 parties here tonight with us, and we've asked each of them to prepare a short opening statement. We've drawn lots to decide the order. First, allow me to introduce UKIP's candidate, Peter Adams. So, Peter Adams, in around 45 seconds, tell us why the voters should choose you.
Good evening, Gary. As a more mature candidate, a bit more life experience, I think that the people from Dunfermline are ready for a common sense candidate. Part of my thing will be destroying some of the factoids which some of the political parties produce. For those people who don't know, a factoid is a lie that's produced often enough to people accept it as the truth. For example, you will hear that Scotland will be independent in Europe. That's a complete nonsense, because 83% of the rules and regulations come from the EU. And as a new country going in there, they will have to go into the euro, whether they want to stay in sterling or not, and they will also have to accept all the regulations that come with it. Another factoid is that on the climate change side, that we as Scotland are the Saudi Arabia of renewables. That's another lie. Okay. We're actually destroying the countryside, pushing up the prices of the fuel and pushing people into fuel poverty.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for that. Next, we move to the candidate for the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Susan Leslie.
The important thing in this by-election for Dunfermline is jobs and economic growth. And I think the important thing for the next MSP is to understand how those things actually fit together. There are opportunities to bring more jobs to Dunfermline through increasing our college places, which have been cut by the SNP government. There's also the opportunity to put more money back in people's pockets. It's the Liberals in government that have increased the amount of tax allowances that people have, giving them £700 extra in their pockets. It's the Liberal Democrats in government that have delivered the national insurance cut as well for businesses. And it's seeing all of those things come together, along with regeneration of our high streets, with a more varied services, not just shops, but also services. And to have an MSP that sees how all of these things can actually fit together to deliver a more prosperous Dunfermline that I think is important.
Thank you very much for that. Now, the turn of Zara Kitson, who is the Scottish Green Party candidate.
I'm standing in this election because the people of Dunfermline deserve a principled MSP who will work with and for communities. The town and the surrounding villages have been forgotten both by Westminster and Holyrood. I'm working for better buses and better rail connections, to reinvigorate the town, for insulated homes for everyone and affordable homes, and for a strong football club under fan ownership. I'm calling on Fife Council and Scottish Government to put an end to passing the buck between one another and to act now to stop bedroom tax evictions. I'll be a fresh voice and determined voice for the people of Dunfermline and beyond.
OK, thank you very much for that. Next, for the Scottish Conservatives, James Reekie.
Well, I live in Dunfermline, I grew up there, I work there. We've ran what's been regarded as a really positive issues-focused campaign. And that's the kind of MSP people will get if they elect me on Thursday. Someone who's focused on the important issues, who's focused on getting the town centre moving again, getting on the side of small businesses and not having 2 eyes on the referendum. That's the positive vision we need to see for Dunfermline, and that's what I will deliver if I'm elected on Thursday.
Thank you very much. And now for the SNP, their candidate, Shirley-Ann Somerville.
I vote for the SNP on Thursday as I vote for Dunfermline's priorities. I've been standing shoulder to shoulder with the parents of the schools threatened by the Fife Council for closure. But we're also working hard to protect people's household incomes at that time, whether it's freezing the council tax, free prescriptions, no tolls on the Forth crossings. These have all been delivered for the SNP, for Dunfermline and the West Fife villages. And even as a candidate, I've already been working hard for that area. I've seen very constructive dialogue with the Chief Executive of NHS Fife, which means we now have a guarantee of maternity services back at the Queen Margaret that will be welcomed by parents across Dunfermline and the West Fife villages. I'm also very pleased at the SNP conference that we've now got John Swinney guaranteeing that the new Queen's Ferry crossing will be toll-free. We've delivered for Dunfermline and West Fife, and I would like to continue to do so as its politician.
And an introductory statement from Cara Hilton from the Scottish Labour Party.
Dunfermline deserves a fresh start. We've been badly let down by the SNP, not just for landing us with Bill Walker, but for putting Scotland on pause. I'm a local mum who lives here in Dunfermline. I work in Dunfermline. My 3 young children go to school and nursery here. The people that I speak to every day in the playground, in the shops, on the doorstep, they tell me they want an MSP who will fight for them on the everyday issues that matter to them. An MSP that will fight for a fairer deal on childcare, a fairer deal on living standards, a fairer deal on college places and job opportunities, and a fairer deal for our town centre. I will always put Dunfermline first, and I will stand up for local families. The last thing that Dunfermline needs is an MSP that will put the referendum first and Dunfermline second. A vote for Labour on Thursday is a vote for a fairer, better Dunfermline, a fairer, better Scotland and a fairer, better United Kingdom.
OK, thank you for that. Now, there's one other candidate who's not here with us tonight. John Black is standing as an independent. He founded the Scottish Jacobite Party.
Scotland needs change, and the SNP version of change is gutless. I've challenged the First Minister Alex Salmond to a live head-to-head debate. He's very keen to debate David Cameron. I think a lot of the SNP policies should be questioned, and they need to be questioned before Alex Salmond debates David Cameron.
If elected as the MP for Dunfermline, what will you do for the people of that constituency?
I'll work with them to improve the state of Dunfermline, to improve the state of Scotland. There has to be a partnership between the government and the people. The people have to change. There are lots of things wrong with society in Scotland. The people have got to demand better, they've got to demand better customer service, and they've got to demand better politicians.
So lots of policy areas there for us to debate during the course of this evening's programme. Let's begin with the big issue of the day, the situation at Grangemouth, the ongoing dispute there. Workers had until 6 o'clock earlier this evening to decide whether to take up a new package of terms and conditions from management. That's going to be discussed by the board tomorrow of INEOS, the parent company. Shirley-Ann Somerville, whose side are you on in this dispute?
Well, we all want to see Grangemouth back up and running again, and when the First Minister was in the constituency this morning, I discussed with him this issue, particularly because we will have people in Dunfermline who work there, or local companies who may service the plant. So this is a very serious issue in Dunfermline. I think what we need to see is both sides getting around the negotiating table and beginning that process again. This will do no good to the Scottish economy, and what we need to see is a quick process that will see a functioning plant for the good of Scotland.
Isn't the problem, though, that the company isn't listening to the First Minister?
Well, the First Minister can't make either side sign an agreement. You know, this has to come down to both sides getting round the table and doing just that. This is a very dynamic situation. It's very fluid and it's changing, you know, as we speak today, which is why I think we need to take a very serious tone on this and ensure that both sides get round the negotiating table and get the result which is good for the Scottish economy, which is the plant up and running as quickly as possible.
Cara Hilton, do you back the union's position?
Well, what I would say is that I don't think that the way that this dispute is handled is how the industrial relations should be handled in the 21st century. I think we need to get the workers back to work as soon as possible, and workers, unions and management need to get round the table, secure a deal that gets Grangemouth back up and running. It's too important to the economy of Scotland and the UK for the plant to be shut down. I hope that we can get the workers back to work as soon as possible.
But if you say this isn't the way to deal with industrial relations, are you admitting there are faults on both sides here?
No, what I'm saying is I think the unions have been constructive. The unions have said that they won't go on strike and while we negotiate a settlement that suits both the unions and management. I hope that they can get back around the table, secure a deal, and I hope that we can get the plant up and running again as soon as possible.
But this all started because one of the union conveners was actually involved in part of his time when he should have been working in there, getting involved in the Falkirk by-election and getting involved with the candidate there. That's why, as part of our deal on our recall policy, we could have recalled Eric Joyce across there. We could have recalled Bill Walker here and saved a lot of hassle.
It's not the issue. I mean that's not.
No, that started it.
But what I think what Shirley and Cara said has been broadly right. You've got to have a process where the UK government and the Scottish government are getting these people around the table and getting a deal. Because right now we're not making any progress. We need to start making progress to get Grangemouth open again.
Has the management handled this properly?
No, look, it's not about whether management had properly or not. It's about, can we actually get a constructive deal for Grangemouth? And so far, we need to get, the consultation period is obviously still ongoing, but we need to get these people around the table and get a deal, bashed out and get this fixed.
I think it's important to remember that this isn't just about one issue about the unions. It's far more complex than that. There are issues around union representation and the unions. There's also issues around the management of the plant. There's issues about the long-term sustainability of the plant. And it's all of those issues that people need to get round the table and talk about, with the help of ACAS if necessary. But we would certainly encourage people to get back round the table, hopefully with the plant up and running. I think it would be a gesture of good faith on the management's part to get the plant up and running and then take the negotiations to the side and thrash out a deal that talks about the long-term sustainability of the plant, and that's what's good for Scotland.
But the union are arguing that ultimately this is a bit of a manufactured dispute on the part of the management. They say that actually the money is there to keep this plant going.
And I think that's where you get into the complexities. You can argue both sides. And I don't think any of us here necessarily have all of the facts in front of us. I think what we need to do is to look at both issues. One, the industrial dispute that's going on just now in terms of the unions, but also in terms of the long-term sustainability of the plant. Those two have to go together, and everybody has to be able to discuss them together.
I think this
Sarah Kitson, would the Greens be happy to see the end of Grangemouth?
I think this is a prime example of multinationals holding ordinary working people and governments to ransom. This is a Swedish company, £30 billion profit or turnover every single year, and they are holding all of the strings here. And this is workers, this is people's livelihoods, many people who do live in the constituency, and I think the way that the company have chosen to go about this is just wrong.
But unless the company makes a profit, they would argue that there is no future for the plant.
The company need to be looking at the long-term sustainability of new innovative industries in Scotland and what that might look like. And at the moment, they could be investing in a sort of longer-term vision of the plant that involves transferable skills of workers and actually looking at protecting jobs in a sustainable industry in a sustainable Scotland that's moving away from this kind of industry that's shown to be unsustainable and actually investing in real sustainable jobs that are putting the rights of workers first.
Should the SNP administration be looking at nationalisation, Shirley-Ann Somerville?
Well, we need to get the plant back up and running and concentrate on the process that we're in the middle of at the moment. This isn't a plant that's up for sale. This isn't a plant that's failed. We have two sides in a dispute.
But Royal Mail isn't up for sale now, but Alex Salmond says he would renationalise that.
Well, it has been up for sale. There is part of it that's already been privatised, and I think that will be proving highly unpopular with people who are concerned about losing a very valuable public service, one which even Mrs Thatcher wouldn't privatise.
But you could argue that Grangemouth is vital to the Scottish economy. It's valuable too, isn't it?
It is
perhaps more valuable than an airport in Ayrshire.
It is vital to the Scottish economy, but this isn't a failing plant. This is not the plant that's up for sale. We have two sides in an industrial dispute. We need to get round the table and sort this out. Now, the First Minister and the Finance Secretary have been doing their best to do that, but they cannot force an agreement on either side, which is why we need them to get back round the table and get this sorted out for the good of the Scottish economy.
Cara Hilton, should this plant be in public hands?
No, I don't think that is the issue here. The issue here is that the plant is vital to the Scottish economy. I mean, Grangemouth makes up 10% of Scotland's GDP. It's vital that we get the workers back to work as soon as possible, and I look forward to them getting back around the table and securing a deal that enables Grangemouth to start working again.
But we're hearing from the Greens, they believe that the country's being held to ransom by the company here. That wouldn't happen if the government ran such an important installation.
Yeah, as Susan has already said, this is a very complex issue, and I'm sure it's all very interesting, but voters in Dunfermline, they want to hear about what we are going to do for Dunfermline. This is the Dunfermline by-election. Let's get back to the real issues in the Dunfermline by-election campaign.
You've heard in nationalised industries how the trade unions actually blackmail and control what's happening.
But from a UKIP's point of view, you would need Grangemouth if you were ever in power, because you don't believe in wind farms, you don't believe in global warming. You would need a petrochemical plant like this.
Yes, of course we do. We believe they should have a complete mixture of power generation. That's why we believe it's complete nonsense to actually be closing down the nuclear power stations. They should be refurbished. They don't provide all this carbon which they are getting concerned about. They don't have a problem with that. they don't destroy. If they're replaced on where they are at the moment, they don't have this problem at the moment as you're just destroying Scotland with the wind farms, with the wind turbines, which are doing nothing.
The companies say that without investment and the way things are going at the moment, the plant could close, James Reekie. How big a disaster for Scotland would that be?
No, I don't think we want to see that. We clearly don't want to see Grangemouth close. I think that probably there's a good consensus here that we want Grangemouth to be open and be running again in a very short period of time, and hopefully we can get that achieved if we get everyone working together. Because, like Susan says, I mean, you don't want to get bogged down in the complexities of these things because it's important that it's open again. That's the key issue here, and that's what we need to do.
But it would be a disaster for the Scottish economy, wouldn't it?
I think it would be very serious for the Scottish economy if Grangemouth were to close, and that's why it's really important that you've seen consensus around this room. And I think that's important, that every single candidate here has agreed that we need to get the plant up and running and everybody back round the table. That's what's important at this stage, and I don't think it's about party politics or trying to find differences between us. It's about our concerted effort to do what's the right thing for the Scottish economy, because it is very important for the Scottish economy to have a sustainable and functioning Grangemouth plant.
OK, let's move on to an issue that has dominated this election campaign, and that's about schools in the Dunfermline constituency. The council is consulting on the potential closure of 3 schools. That was a position that you backed initially, wasn't it, Cara Hilton?
What I did is I voted for the consultation to take place. The situation that Fife Council is in is that in our primary schools there's 11,000 empty places. On the other hand, the Fife Council is facing £100 million of cuts from Holyrood. So there's no doubt that difficult decisions are ahead. But I find it astounding that the SNP are running their whole campaign on this issue when it was the SNP's education spokesperson, Douglas Chapman, who started off the school estate review process. And you may shake your head, Shirley, but it was there in the Dunfermline press in black and white when he said that schools would have to close regardless of who won the May elections.
Well, just explain why you voted initially for, on the council.
OK, I voted for the consultation process to go ahead because we've got difficult decisions. We've got £100 million of cuts in Fife. As a mum myself, I'd like to keep every school here in Dunfermline, here in Fife, open.
So do you stand by that decision, or have you changed your position?
Well, I've been backing the parents at Pigcorthy Primary in their campaign to keep the school open. I think that's a sustainable school. It's a school that is full to the brim. It's 96% full. And I'm working with the parents, standing shoulder to shoulder with them in their campaign to keep the school open. Which
parents do you believe were using their children as political footballs, as you said previously?
What concerns me here is that we've got the SNP running their whole election campaign on the schools issue, but it's only because of SNP budget cuts that Fife Council is in this difficult position.
Well, we'll address that in a second,
if the SNP really want to keep our schools open here in Fife, then perhaps Shirley could ask Alex Salmond for the money for Fife Council to keep Crombie, Wellwood and Pigcorthy School open, because I want to keep these schools open, and I hope that is something that perhaps Shirley could commit to doing.
Well, we'll come to Shirley and Sunderland in a second, but do you still believe that some parents are using their children as political footballs in this dispute?
I think what we want is the best solution for children here in Dunfermline. We need to have a school estate that is sustainable. Pigcorthy School is a sustainable school, and I've called both publicly and privately for Pigcorthy School to be withdrawn from the consultation process. If that doesn't happen, I would urge everyone to take a full part in the consultation so we can save Pigcorthy School and keep that school open.
It's a fair point, isn't it, Shirley and Somerville? The council budget has been hit. Tough decisions have to be made. Surely some of the blame for this could lie with the Scottish Government.
Well, the previous education convener, which Cara mentioned, did talk about doing a review of the school estate. What he went on then to talk about was that it would be based on educational benefit, and the only reason that you should close schools is for educational benefit. So perhaps rather than using the SNP previous administration as a scapegoat, we could focus on the educational benefit for the children.
So you would keep schools open no matter how low the roll went?
You look at each one in turn, and it's unfortunate that Cara seems to have forgotten about the village schools that are in this difficult process as well.
So you do accept that there are maybe circumstances where schools have to close?
You look at each process individually, and all of the 3 are flawed. Now, the last time that Cara was on a debate, she blamed a council official for her vote, claiming that the they'd misled her about it. Now, thankfully, the parents weren't misled. The SNP councillors weren't misled, because they know that it will actually cost less to refurbish Picorthy than it would to split these children up into different schools, break up that community and move them into different parts of Dunfermline. So it makes no financial sense to close Picorthy either.
And if this gets called in, would you lobby ministers to vote against closure?
Well, I'm very confident that we won't get that far, because the
But if that was the case?
I'm very confident we won't get that far. If Fife Council see sense and the Labour administration see sense, and Cara would stop voting for the closures of the schools, then that will not happen.
Shirley would know that there's actually been no vote to close Picorthy School. There's been a vote to enter a consultation period. That is an open consultation. When the time comes, I've given my commitment to vote to keep Picorthy Primary School open. I've been working with the parents from the start, and whatever happens in this election on Thursday, I'll still be working with the parents on Friday morning. Will you still be working with the parents, Shirley?
Yes, I will,
morning?
and I've given them that reassurance that we will help them continuously. That's why the First Minister was there, to support them and listen to the parents in particular. But consultations do have an impact in themselves. You know, the Crombie role has went down because of it. People in Picorthy are already picking different schools because they are frightened about the catchment areas. These consultation votes aren't harmless exercise that don't make a difference. They're already affecting parents and communities, and we wouldn't have a Save the Picorthy Pain or a Save Wellwood or Crombie if the Labour administration hadn't voted for the closure consultation to begin.
It's not so much that, you know, the consultation wasn't, in terms of the process being carried out, yes, it's been open. But the reality is, the one option that's not been in any of the consultation documents is keeping the schools open. Now, that's a fact. There's a lot of complex detail about these particular schools. If you look at Crombie, I mean, it's a rural school. There should be a presumption against closure of rural schools. There's a lot of issues about transport towards the receiving school. And I think that, you know, parents have got really serious issues here that are getting missed in this by-election because we're too focused on sort of how Cara voted in for something or what the SNP said in 2012, and I think we're forgetting now what the schools issue is really about. And
but do you accept that there may well be circumstances in which schools have to close?
Oh, look, the Conservatives in Fife back the principle of a school estate review. Anyone in their right mind has to do that. We have to appreciate the financial situation that Fife Council finds itself in, but there's no financial sense in closing, for example, Picorthy, because it would cost the taxpayers some £3 million. So there's not a financial case to be made for the closure of Picorthy.
What is your position on this, Susan Leslie?
I think the important thing that everybody seems to have forgotten is the one thing that parents and communities have said to me, and I've been in touch with these parents and these communities actually for months now, because I chair the scrutiny committee which is going to receive the consultation reports. And I made a commitment to them that they would come to scrutiny committee and they would be able to make their own case, that their voices would be heard, not through any politician, but directly to the councillors who were going to be making the decisions.
And have you offered them your support?
Well, as the chair of that committee, it would not be the correct thing for me to do
That's
at
a bit of a
this
cop-out,
stage.
isn't it?
No, it would not be the correct thing for me to do anything other than stand by my commitment to make sure the really important people in this debate are heard.
So
and that's the parents.
Just to be clear then, just to be clear, so you're telling the voters of Dunfermline then to put a cross in the box next to your name if they want these schools saved, but you may not be on their side come the time?
No, because a decision has not yet been made. A case has not actually been made to close any of those schools.
Well, let's say the case is made. Let's say a decision is made. Where would you stand on that?
If there is not a good case made to close any school, then I would not vote to close it. It must be a good case based on the structure of the building, the facilities in the building, but most importantly, the really important case to be made is the educational benefits case.
So there are circumstances in which you would support the closure of the schools?
There are some circumstances, but I think it's most importantly about the educational benefits, and that's what we've not heard. That's what we have to wait and hear through the consultation process. We've got HMIE coming in to do that for us within Fife Council, and the really important thing, and the thing that people have been asking me about, those communities and those parents, every single one of them says, we want to make our own case. We want to have to make our case ourselves and our voices to be heard, and I'll make that commitment to them.
What have you been telling the voters, Peter Arms?
The thing is, it's always hard because as people move around, you have to change the school structures. But where you've got, like with Picorthy, where it's actually almost full, it doesn't make sense. Other ones where people are sort of moving away, the structures of the building are not viable, then there has to be change. And especially in Dunfermline, where you're getting all these new people moving into different settlements, there've got to be new schools made. So where they're changing them, that's the hard decisions it's got to be. And the parents should always be involved in that part of the decision. Talk about these consultations, as they've said. Part of the consultations, when it starts off, people already start moving their kids because they think it's a phony. They've been through these consultations before, where it's going down in paper, we're consulting the parents, but they're not actually consulting the parents. They've already almost made the decisions themselves. That's why they should involve them, really, by having a local referendum for the parents there. They can actually go and tick the box as to what decision they want.
Do you think any parent's going to tick a box to say, yes, close the school?
Parents are sensible. If you put the case that this particular school is no longer viable for a whole variety of reasons, and these are the various options, the people won't accept that and go along with it. They won't just do it out of bloody mindedness.
What are you telling the voters, Anna Kitson?
I think for me this actually raises awareness to much wider issues. The first one being that it shouldn't take a by-election to bring voice to parents and to school closures, and that's what it's taken in this community. And I do seriously have my doubts if this issue would be given as much political attention
It's been a long-standing campaign.
with the by-election. Sorry, can you let me finish, please?
Because I made a
let her finish
commitment to tell those parents, and they were given that commitment, that their voices would be heard when the reports came forward, and that commitment was given months ago. So to say this has only come out as a result of the by-election is simply not true.
I think, though, but across the board, though, I think that actually the parents have done a great job of raising awareness of this issue and getting us all on board and backing them. And I think that that's fantastic, and the communities should be praised for that. But I do think that there still is a wider issue of people and parents and communities' voices being heard out with an election situation. I think that that is a real concern. We have a real lack of democracy in communities. And I think for me, one of the other issues that comes into this is we are facing serious cuts. And they're coming from Westminster, being further compounded at Holyrood by the freeze in council tax, which I don't think is helping. I think that we need to have an open dialogue to actually work with communities, because when we ask communities and parents, would you opt for a dialogue to raise revenue locally to save services? Parents say yes. And I think that that's the kind of discussion we need to have, as pragmatic solutions that are going to work for parents, communities and, importantly, children, because this is people's futures we're talking about.
Well, that seems to be the main issue that has come up during this campaign. But James Reekie, what other issues have come up on the doorstep? What are the issues that people are saying concern them and therefore, as a candidate, are concerning you?
Well, I mean, I use local services as well, so I already share most of the concerns that local people have. I think in terms of the town centre, you know, it's a fact that there are less businesses now in the town centre than there were last year. The economy's growing, the customer base is still there, but I think small businesses are, well, small and medium-sized businesses are getting held back a bit by business rates, punitive measures from the Scottish Government. As well, of course, centralisation of hospital services, and of course the long-term security of our energy supply. I think those are some of the key issues that have been raised in the by-election.
And are they concerned about the policy from your party at Westminster of the so-called bedroom tax, for instance?
No, look, I think people understand that the under-occupancy charge is there to get people into suitable accommodation. We've already seen in Fife that those who would be affected by the spare room subsidy, 10% of them are now moved into work, so they're now no longer claiming housing benefit at all. I think, to be fair to most councils across Scotland, for a number of years they've been moving their tenants into properly suited accommodation. But we still have 60,000 overcrowded homes in Scotland, and that's not good enough. We've got to do something to get people into appropriate accommodation, and I think people do understand that.
What issues have been coming up on the doorstep for you?
Well, the bedroom tax is one of the issues that's coming up, and you know, this grand idea that people will move about Fife falls down on one simple level: is there are no smaller flats or houses for them to move into. You know, I've spoken to a number of people who are frightened about getting evicted from their home, concerned about getting into arrears through no fault of their own, because they're in a house, maybe because that's where their family grew up, or they were actually put in a larger house by the council or by a housing association. They may have disabilities and require other rooms. This is actually affecting people. We're already...
Those people should be receiving discretionary payments, and in many cases they're exempt from the spare room subsidy.
But unfortunately, we have a number of people in Dunfermline and the villages who are seeing their home being threatened. I mean, we are talking about people's homes here, and we're forcing them to move, except there is nowhere for them to move to.
So would you back Parliament legislating to prevent evictions then?
Well, the Scottish Government has, in its budget for this year and for next year, confirmed that we will help people with some of the difficulties that they're facing on that.
But what about evictions?
But evictions are a very, very serious issue, and there's a very simple way that we can deal with evictions straight away, which is the SNP councillors on Fife Council have tried again and again to get the Labour administration, including Cara, to vote for a no evictions policy. That would stop evictions now.
The Scottish Government could stop them, and the Scottish Parliament could stop them across the country, rather than just those who live in areas where there are SNP councils.
And we all know how we have to go through a consultation process and a bill process and wait for the parliamentary timetable. Votes have already happened in Fife Council to try and stop this, to maintain a no evictions policy, and we will try again to do that at a council level. And I would like the councillors to give the reassurance that they would actually vote for that no evictions policy, because that's a much simpler and a much quicker way of ensuring that we don't see people frightened of losing their homes before Christmas.
And I think you have to be quite honest about this, Shelley-Ann, because there are significant legal issues for Fife Council if they were to go for a blanket no eviction. What I have supported, and my issues with the bedroom tax, with the spare room subsidise, are a matter of public record. I do have serious concerns about it.
So the Lib Dems are wrong to back this at Westminster?
No,
then?
what I have said is that I have concerns about the implementation of it while there are not the homes for people to move to. And that's why, alongside many other Scottish Liberal Democrats, I have worked hard with Willie Rennie and with the Secretary of State for Scotland to increase the amount of discretionary benefit that's there, to increase the way that people are exempted from this. And I will continue to campaign for that, and also for the additional houses to be built, so we need them.
But you're robbing Peter to pay Paul with all these discretionary payments, aren't you? Because those houses aren't there at the moment.
That's right, and that's why we need to try and accelerate as much as we can the house building process. And Liberal Democrats in Fife Council have supported that. We have also supported the administration of Fife Council for their stance, which is those people who come forward and explain to us that we've got an issue, who have applied for discretionary grant, there will be no evictions of those people. What we cannot do
is we're having people coming forward with the receipts to prove how much they've spent in Tesco's that week. That's the hoops that you're making people jump through. Whether another area of the country there is a no evictions policy, and I think this is an example of where a council needs to lead from the front and try and help people at this time, rather than making them lose their dignity.
Fife Council has done that by saying they will offer all possible help to people who find themselves in difficulty. What we cannot do legally is to go into a no evictions policy for every single one of our tenants, no matter what their circumstances. That simply would not be legal.
Cara Hilton, have there been other issues coming up on the doorstep for you?
One of the main issues that people are raising with me is a concern about jobs. There's so many jobs in our area that are dependent on being part of the United Kingdom. Jobs at the dockyard down in Rosyth, 2,000 of them that are directly dependent on MOD contracts. Jobs in the banking sector, a major employer here in Dunfermline, dependent on being part of the United Kingdom. People are concerned that those jobs would be under threat with the SNP's plans to break up Britain. But also energy prices has been a big issue on the doorsteps. People are really pleased to see Ed Miliband coming out and say that he's going to take action against energy companies. I mean, I spoke to a woman the other day on the doorsteps. She has to put, once she puts her children in bed at night, she turns off the heating, she turns off the lights because she can't afford the energy bills. I think it's time we had action on these energy companies. Families in Dunfermline deserve a better deal. These energy companies are ripping people off.
You mentioned Rosyth there. Are you happy that the Labour government commissioned these aircraft carriers which are being constructed at Rosyth, but actually one of them will never even be used?
Well, the aircraft carrier is providing 2,000 jobs to Fife, 150 apprenticeships.
So do we just keep building things that we don't need to provide jobs?
Jobs are a key issue on the doorsteps. 2,000 jobs here in Fife are dependent on the aircraft carrier project, and that 150 apprenticeships. Those are jobs that Dunfermline needs. Dunfermline needs better action in jobs. And one of the main issues that people are raising with me here is the cuts to colleges. This is making it harder for people to get back into work. It's making it harder for mums and dads who've taken a break to bring up the kids to get back into college to work. And it's making it harder for people to have a second chance. You know, we need to reverse the college cuts, and we need more action and more funding for Fife College in Dunfermline.
Just on that point on Rosyth is an interesting one. My father's worked in the dockyard since he left school. He still works there. He hasn't worked there all the time because of the cuts. The Labour force in the Rosyth hasn't closed in that time that he was there. because of a fear of independence. That's happened under the Labour Party. There's not a fear of independence.
How many aircraft carriers would be built at Rosyth for the Scottish Defence Force, Shirley Ann Somerville?
Well, I think we have to look at people's track record here as well. And I think this fear that people bring up about Rosyth losing jobs because of independence, as I say, it's already had its Labour workforce halved under the Labour Party. That's a fact that's already happened. The banking crisis happened under a Labour government with a Scottish Chancellor. That's already happened as well. These are realities that have already hit the people that you're talking about, and they haven't happened because of a fear of independence.
Has independence been coming up on the doorsteps?
It certainly has, but not people in favour of independence. I've been actually very surprised how that people on the doorstep, unasked, will say whether or not they are voting Liberal Democrat or not. Many of them are, but those that say that they're perhaps voting Labour are saying, but we're not in favour of independence. Those who might well be voting for other parties are not in favour of independence. But the other issue that's coming up on the doorstep that people haven't yet mentioned is about centralising services, centralising our police and fire. And that has been brought up on the doorsteps, not just by serving police and fire officers with me, but also with generally members of the public who are exceptionally concerned about the centralising agenda from the Scottish Government. We were the only party that opposed the centralisation of those services right at the very beginning. We didn't think it would happen as quickly or as fast, but we're already seeing that services are being cut. In fact, the Chief Constable himself said only earlier on this year that while he was committed to bringing in Police Scotland on budget, he personally could not see how it could be done without cutting the number of police officers.
Yet the crime rate is down.
It is, and we're really pleased that it is.
That's not necessarily the whole picture. I mean, we've released figures during the by-election campaign which show that the number of assaults in Fife recorded by hospitals are much higher than the number of assaults that are recorded by Police Scotland. Now, there's a serious issue there. To say that crime is down doesn't always show the whole picture. You've got to look at things like that. You've got to look at those kind of figures. And to see a disparity between the large number of people who are admitted to hospital as a result of assault and those who are recorded by Police Scotland, you know, people in Fife and Dunfermline want to know just exactly how safe their streets are.
So are you against the idea of a central police force?
No, look, I think the Conservatives supported the idea of a national police force for Scotland, but I think we've seen some serious issues in terms of implementation. I've spoken to a lot of officers on the doorstep who also have serious concerns about the implementation of it. But also, of course, we've seen the closure of the front desk of Oakley Police Station. The reason given by Alex Salmond was that these police stations are underused. Oakley is not underused. It sees some 8,000 visitors a year. So I think there's been some serious issues about the implementation of the centralisation.
And I think
this Oakley issue has nothing to do with the centralisation of services because the police station will stay open. What the consultation is about, and it's a Police Scotland operational consultation at the moment, is about whether we're using the resources effectively. So we'd rather see police out in our communities on the beat rather than behind a desk in a station that's not used very much. Now, I've raised concerns with the Chief Inspector about this directly because this isn't a public consultation that's been going out. We haven't actually asked the people of Oakley what they think as part of the Police Scotland, and I've made that commitment that we will continue, because what we don't want to see is this being carried out as an internal police matter, but we're not actually asking the individuals involved. But recorded crime has went down in Fife. The number of police officers has went up in Fife, and I think that's the output that we're going to see. And it's been implemented continuously by an SNP government. Yes, we worked with other parties when we were in minority government.
That's the issue.
But we're still delivering more police.
Well, let me ask Sarah Kitson about the issue for you that has come up on the doorstep. What has been the big issue?
Local jobs for local people, a feeling that Dunfermline and particularly the Western villages have been forgotten about, they've been left behind, they feel that they don't have voice. Lots of disillusionment with main party politics, particularly between the sort of bickering between Labour and the SNP. And actually, I think for me, this election is about the people of Dunfermline and the people in those villages, and that's what we need to bring it back to.
Has independence come up, given that your party's in support?
Yeah, independence has come up, and I think people are generally, they are refreshed when they sort of hear our view of independence, a much more radical view than the SNP's version of independence. We want to see further devolved power to local people. We want to see community-owned energy and resources, really putting people at the heart of our economy before big business and profit. If we want, we want an independent Scotland that is a vision of a new type of Scotland. Scotland. And I think that, for me, I think people have been... There is some people around the doors who say, oh, you know, I would vote independence if it wasn't for Alex Salmond, because some people are, you know, people have got different views about Alex Salmond, and that's fair enough. But, you know, I'm saying
so it's not about... Is that what you're saying?
It's not about one man. It's not about one party. I mean, you know, people relate to different people. But I have had a lot of Labour voters who have said, actually, I am going to be voting yes, because I want a different kind of Scotland. And they do feel that there's a lack of representation for their voice right now in Scottish politics. And that's what I've been focusing on, and actually bringing it back to local jobs, community ownership, and actually putting people back at the heart of politics, because that's people feel forgotten about. And actually, I think whoever wins this election, it's not a resounding success when we only have, on average, over 50% of people turning out to vote. I think we need to be asking ourselves serious questions as to why that is. We're in a political bubble, and we need to shift that paradigm.
Cara Hilton, do you support a continued council tax freeze?
Yes, I've been clear from the start. I think it is the right policy at this time. In fact, it was Labour in Glasgow Council that first introduced the council tax freeze, because they recognised that the squeeze on people's living standards. As a Fife councillor, I stood on a Labour manifesto that committed us to a council tax freeze for the lifetime of this Parliament. The issue is that the council tax freeze isn't fully funded, and that's why Fife Council is having to look at £100 million of cuts.
So are you going against party policy? Because it seems that Joanne Lamont is looking at various options here for
not at all. Labour is fully
issues that she believes where people perhaps are getting something for nothing.
No, not at all. Labour fully supports the council tax freeze. All that Joanne was saying in that debate is that the services here that people value in Scotland, free prescriptions, free bus passes, the council tax freeze, we need to look at how we can continue to provide them when there's less money going around. Just as families here in Dunfermline are having to look at the budgets and make them stretch further, we need to look at how we continue to fund these universal services that people here support in the future.
How will that be funded, Shirley-Ann Somerville? Well, the squeeze is on, isn't it?
They'll be funded if Labour would actually support the SNP budget that's coming up in Parliament, because it's costed and it's balanced as it has been when Labour have voted against the council tax fees. But I wonder when Cara talks about the council tax fees that they put in Glasgow, what did the people of Fife do wrong that year to still have their council tax increase when you were freezing it in your heartland in Glasgow? You know, what did Fife do wrong to get it increased by 50% the last time that Labour were in power? So we may have seen a development in the last couple of days of a by-election where we're seeing material that's brought out which suggests a council tax freeze from the Labour Party, but it wasn't good enough for Fife when you introduced it. It was just good enough for Glasgow.
Yeah, and just on your leaflet, you say Labour was the first to scrap bridge tolls in Scotland. It's a bit disingenuous to have a picture of the Forth Road Bridge next to that, isn't it?
Well, not at all. I mean, as you say, Labour was the first party to scrap bridge tolls on the Skye and Erskine Bridge. Labour supported the removal of bridge tolls on the Forth Bridge, and the reason that we have a picture of the Forth Bridge and that picture is because I'm fed up with the SNP misrepresenting our views. The fact is, Labour is totally opposed to bridge tolls. Labour is opposed to any bridge tolls on the new Forth crossing, and I feel that the SNP have been misleading people here in Dunfermline. No, this leaflet is about putting the record straight.
We have a Labour Cuts Commission that's going through where the chair of it has said that, you know, there's nothing off the table. We've had the Labour leader who had a speech about a something for nothing culture that, funnily enough, seems to be taken off the website from today when we were trying to look for some quotes from it. But you left the tolls on the bridge for 2 years after you took it over the Erskine Bridge. That cost every person in the constituency £233 a year. For 2 years, that's a lot of money that you left Fife for again when you concentrated on the West Coast.
Can I say what people are tired of? People are very tired in Dunfermline of the bickering between Labour and the SNP. Through their leaflets, through the debates, they are tired of this sniping at each other.
Should the new bridge be toll-free?
I certainly think it should be, because you can't put a toll on a new bridge when everything else is toll-free. So absolutely it must be toll-free. But I think the important thing that people of Dunfermline are saying is they don't want to see this bickering between politicians. What they actually want in Dunfermline is to go back to the level of service they had when they had a strong Liberal Democrat team in Dunfermline with Willie Rennie and an MSP.
Why did he not stand in this by-election then if he's so confident in his issue?
Because he is the leader of our Scottish party and he has a job to do right way across Scotland. Therefore, as a list MSP, that is is the ideal place for him to do that. And also because he wants another strong MSP in Dunfermline, myself, who has a strong record of being a good local councillor, representing local people, representing local communities. That's what people in Dunfermline want, not this bickering between the Labour and SNP.
Let me just ask you the time that we have available, if we could just go round each of you. We'll start with you, Peter Adams.
Yeah.
What would you bring as an individual to the Scottish Parliament if you were elected on Thursday?
Just before I do that...
Just very briefly.
Yeah, just because when you asked about what people were hearing on doorsteps, you didn't ask me, you asked the rest of them. And one of the things that is coming up on the doorstep is people are just sick fed up with the parties and they're not sure if they're actually going to vote, quite a lot of them. The other thing again, and I've mentioned it before, is the whole thing about the wind turbine issues. Maybe not in the centre of Dunfermline, but around the peripheries.
So you would
and
fight against
also
those.
the High Street as well.
OK, well, I need to move on because time is tight, I'm afraid, now. But James Reekie, just in a word or two, what would you bring to the Scottish Parliament?
Look, I think, I live here. I grew up here. I work here. We've run a very positive issues-based campaign. We haven't engaged in the sort of spin and negativity.
So you would bring local
I think
knowledge.
I'd bring local knowledge.
Just very briefly, if you wouldn't mind, in a word or two.
A champion for local schools and the protection in the household income with the delivery of an SMB budget, including the council tax freeze, free prescriptions and no tolls on the bridge.
Cara Hilton, what would you bring?
I'm a local mum. I'll be putting local families first and I'll be campaigning for a fairer deal for families here in Dunfermline.
Principles and values, fresh thinking, and putting local people and communities at the heart and actually working with people instead of on their behalf.
And Susan Leslie, what would you bring?
A hard-working MSP who cares about individuals and families, and we're working every minute for those communities, and those individuals and those families.
OK, well look, let me thank you all very much indeed for joining us on the programme this evening. It's been a pleasure to speak to all of you. And that's the end of our debate. You have 3 more days to make up your mind, either how to vote if you live in the Dunfermline constituency or whom to back at the bookies. Glenn Campbell will be here on Thursday night to bring you the results and discuss the ramifications. That's all from me tonight. Gordon Brewer is back here tomorrow. I'll be back on Good Morning Scotland in a few hours' time. Good night.